Well, welcome everyone to another edition of the CEO PauseCast. I'm Kevin Cashman. I'm with Korn Ferry, and we're very fortunate today to have a guest, Ron Reising, who I've worked with for about 4 years at Duke Energy, which is a Fortune 100 company. And Ron and I have been in the trenches developing about now I think it's a close to 107 of the top people at Duke. So welcome, Ron. It's so great to see you today.
Well, Kevin, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I remember when we met, hopefully you do too, and Duke Energy was looking at developing its top people to meet the demands of a real stretch strategy. And remember when we had that meeting and you had invited many people to speak to you at kind of a shootout.
Sure, Kevin. Well, and maybe a little bit of background on that shootout. So I don't have an HR background, and I had a short transition with my predecessor. And one of the final things that she said to me was, Ron, talent development, leadership development, those may be the most important things you do. And at the time, I didn't really understand what she was saying, but it definitely made an impression on me. And sure enough, a few months later, I'm talking to Lynn Good, and she's asking me, well, Ron, what are we going to do about leadership development? And I remember the first thought that popped into my mind was, I don't know. But I came up with a more appropriate answer to her, which was something like, well, then let me take this back to the team and we'll develop a recommendation. And so as the team got together and we talked about it, Duke had done a number of different things. We had done programs, we had done individual coaching, but there wasn't really anything to build on. So we're really open to new ideas. And we decided to just take a step back and see what was out there and see what was the best fit for us. And that was the basis for the RFP or the shootout where you and I first met.
Well, I have to say, as consulting firms, we don't welcome RFPs. Although in this case, I have to say it was a real pleasure interacting with you and the group. And we noticed that when we shared our research, which we had recently completed, we did it about 4 years ago on enterprise leadership, your eyes really lit up. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. I didn't expect this from a former CFO and a former procurement head and now a CHRO. I didn't expect you to latch on to this concept of enterprise leadership. You remember that?
Absolutely, Kevin, and you're right. As you were there representing the Korn Ferry team, you kept mentioning enterprise leadership. And enterprise leadership was something we talked about a lot at Duke. Lynn Good talked a lot about enterprise leadership at our different leadership meetings and forums. And there you were talking about enterprise leadership. And about the third or fourth time that you mentioned it, I stopped you. And I said, well, Kevin, I don't think we included enterprise leadership in our RFP materials, but yet somehow you know that Duke talks about enterprise leadership. How did you make that connection? And your response was something like, well, Ron, enterprise leadership isn't something we developed to respond to the RFP. Enterprise leadership is what the Korn Ferry program is all about. So there was really just a connection there right from the start around enterprise leadership.
You know, what's interesting is people endorse this idea of enterprise leadership and think it's really desirable, but it's a little more intuitive than it is research based. And we saw it both in our practice and in our assessments that the people that went across the organization to perform and transform and then generated real enduring value were the people that really stood out. And then as we researched it, we started to see the whole framework. What are the strategic outcomes they produce? What are the competencies? And then what are the mindsets underneath all of those competencies? So um, I remember a point where you realized it wasn't casual. It wasn't just two words slapped together by a consultant for the heck of it, that we'd been in the trenches studying this for years and finally codified it in a white paper. So yeah, what as you started to engage this, what did you see in terms of people adopting it, liking the framework, maybe new behaviors? What did you start to see in people? And we'll talk about the process we took you through in just a few minutes.
Well, Kevin, I let me start by talking a little bit more from a background perspective. So we talked about enterprise leadership, but we didn't have a model to develop people to it. So enterprise leadership is just it's just a concept. If you don't have a way to develop to it, it's not going to evolve. So as we started to work together and we created the framework and there was an overall process, what we started to see people responding to is when you're showing up at a cross-functional meeting, there was an understanding that the expectation is you're showing up as an enterprise leader. You're showing up to help find enterprise solutions. You're not there to represent your functional view. That's not going to be enough. And so that uh, talking about enterprise leadership and developing a concept that people could understand and take away some specifics that they apply and how they are showing up to meetings and how they are changing their behavior, how they are changing their leadership. That was the catalyst for us.
That's great. It's one, as you know, enterprise leadership is critical to success today with all of the stretch strategies that are out there. But it's one of the hardest moves to make because early in our career, we're in a function or we're in a geography or a certain business, and then we gain our expertise and then prove that over time, and then we advance. It's kind of like we learn to be an athlete running up and down stairs and we get really fit. And then one day someone says the sport's changed and now it's lateral. You still have to run up and down vertically sometimes, but you also have to now go lateral. And people start to stumble a bit because it's not easy. You may be sacrificing your point of view and even resources for some greater good across the organization. Did you see that as people engaged it more? They realized, oh, this is not a simple thing. This is like a new sport to learn.
I'm not really. I would
Okay.
phrase it differently, Kevin. To me, it is um, the issues, the problems are more complex,
Mhm.
and you're not going to find the solutions with just a functional view. So as we start talking about enterprise leadership and start um, making it clear that we want people to show up and think about the enterprise, not just a functional area, I think it's liberating. And I think people, if you're a leader for a functional area, to be able to show up and play as an enterprise leader, you're playing a more value added role. So I think that was really rewarding for people. And then you have some initial successes and it gains momentum. It's really positive. So I think people really embraced it. And like you had said just a moment ago, there's an intuitive concept there that I think really actually resonated with people.
That's fantastic. The other thing I want to point out that I really love in working together is I go on and on about a concept in research and you go, oh, not really. Not really. And then, but then you say, well, let me tell you how it's applied in the real world. So I think we're a great partnership that way. And
It's been a good partnership.
so, as you know, we had the good fortune to work with the top team. We had the good fortune to develop a success profile that reflected your strategic needs into a leadership model. We got to assess members of the top team. We got to develop them very intensely in something we call the Enterprise Leader Institute, where three of us work with each of the senior team members. And then we started to cascade this down individually, doing assessment and coaching. And then we did a large group program too. We now call it the Enterprise Leader Experience. But with a group of about 60 or 70, we brought the principles and practice of enterprise leadership to a broader group of people. And now that's about 107. So maybe if you could comment a little bit about working with the top team
Mhm.
and what their mindset was going into it and how that got impacted.
Sure. I would say that going into it, um, these are all good leaders. They're all strong leaders. They're all very experienced. They're also really busy.
Yeah.
So if you're going to start a program that's going to be a big time commitment for them, there's going to be some skepticism. I've done this before. How is this different? And really, the big question is this going to be worth my time? And I was a little bit nervous about it. It's a big commitment. It's a big commitment for our whole senior leadership team, including Lynn Good, the CEO.
Mhm.
So away we go. And I would say there were two common themes as we got towards the end. And one theme was I wish I'd done this sooner in my career, which is something that you had said is during the RFP process. You had said that that's a common reaction that you've seen in other companies. The second theme was, yes, I've done something like this before, but this is the best program I've been a part of. And I think what that's really reflecting is, again, these are all really strong leaders. They're experienced leaders, and they're looking for something, some insight that's going to help them be an even better leader. And that's what they found out of the program.
Why do you think they made that comment? Meaning, because we don't just do a smile sheet saying, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would this program be? Because it doesn't tell you anything. But we do ask people, how does this compare to all the
Mhm.
other assessment and development? Then you've got a real comparison in their minds, and a high percentage of people at Duke, if not all the people, said it was one of the best they've ever had. And that's what we see elsewhere too. But why? Why do you think they might say this process was superior to
Sure.
not just others, but all of the experiences in my career? Why
Mhm.
would somebody say that?
Well, I'd go back and start with all of them wanted to be and want to be better leaders. All of
Yeah.
them are willing to put some investment in their development and understand that you can have, there's one thing to be, uh, have some natural skills and abilities, but they all understood um, by making an investment, they could be even better. And
Yeah.
so to me, there was a whole solution here. So you start off with the concept of enterprise leadership that really resonates. The assessments pinpointed some insights. But maybe the thing that was the biggest differentiator is the coaching. So there were three coaches involved. I remember thinking, again, go back to the RFP process. Well, why do you need three coaches? Um, but those coaches, they really connected with the individuals. It's both an understanding of the research behind it, but they were able to communicate it in a way that connected with our leaders. And there's one story from the process that I really love. In part, it reflects how I would think about it. So we had one individual who said something like, "I've spent my whole career trying to keep people out of my head, but I couldn't do that. they wouldn't let me just pass through. They wouldn't let me just go through the motions. They really were able to help me understand and find a better path forward. So I think that coaching makes a huge difference.
It can make a huge difference because in today's world, most people have been assessed. Most people have had a coach, but very few people have had a team like a board,
Mhm.
almost like a board of directors for our development. And if they all tend to agree that we have these strengths and we should work on these things, it gets pretty compelling. So the board of directors idea, I was with a board the other day who said, we don't need 3 or 4 people to, work with our key leaders. And I said, well, maybe as a board, they don't need you and everyone else as well, and just have a board with one person. Isn't that good enough for you all? And they said, oh, I get your point. The complementarity, it's kind of like the Mayo Clinic, pioneered this in healthcare, looking at all the dynamics with an individual gets more ownership and more impact. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you pointed that out.
You know,
What else?
Kevin, before you go on, I'd say there was one other benefit. It's a rigorous process. You, it's a very personal process, and I think there was in addition to the leadership development benefit, there was a team building benefit to it as well. So
Yeah,
these
tell me
individuals,
about that because you
yeah,
would think, working with individuals, you don't necessarily, and maybe they impact their own team, but they impact the team across. So, yeah, tell us about that.
it did. So it's back to it's a thorough process. It's a rigorous process. People, it's very personal, uh, and so I think there's that shared um, sense of going through this rigorous process that was part of the team building, but also each leader knew that their peers were developing development plans, and so there was a shared support that
Mhm.
evolved as we went forward as well. So I think that wasn't something I was expecting, but I think that was a definite benefit of the process as well.
There's also an implied thing that we're all in this together.
Mhm.
We're all growing and developing together as teams, and we're all furthering the strategy together versus people getting plucked out here and there for coaching and wondering, is this good or not good sign, right? So the shared experience too, I think, really
Sure.
helps. Now, you cascaded this a bit more broadly from the senior team as well. Tell us a little bit about that because I can imagine, there's a cost effectiveness to do that.
Right.
But
So,
did they really get deep learning? Because I understand it was a cohort of about 60 people. So how did that work?
well, we felt strongly that it'd be important to go through the Enterprise Leadership Institute with our senior team. But to really have an impact, we thought we had to go deeper in the organization.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't be enough just to have our senior leaders talking about enterprise leader. Again, you're showing up to a cross-functional meeting. You have your senior leaders talking about enterprise leadership to really move the dial and create momentum in a faster way. We
Mhm.
thought we had to go deeper in the organization. So we picked some leaders that we thought had a lot of responsibility, and we wanted to give them some invest in their development. So that's the Enterprise Leadership Accelerator that you mentioned earlier, and we had a good partnership with Corn Ferry to try to tailor something that would be meaningful to us. We didn't want it just to be here's an HR program, here's a bunch of
Yes.
HR terms. So I thought we put together something that really would resonate with our team. And a big part of that was we engaged our senior leaders to really bring the message. this wasn't just the HR team, it wasn't just Corn Ferry. By
Yeah.
including our senior leaders talking about, their leadership journey, listening to them talk about what are things that they're working on, it really gave a lot of credibility to those other leaders deeper in the organization. If you see a senior leader talking about courage, you see a senior leader talking about awareness, and those are something that your coach is talking to you about. It's just, again, it's more meaningful. It really became very powerful.
Yeah, we really saw that too. And it says a lot about your culture and people that the senior group did not come in as experts. They came in as co-learners, co-participants in the, excuse me, in the process. And that really impacted people.
And back to there were some side benefits there about just relationship building, and it really helped flatten the organization.
Mhm.
Those were some other benefits beyond just the specifics related to leadership development.
One thing to wrap this up a bit, I would like to hear about the organizational benefit. You mentioned teams, but I can imagine that individuals would come out of this, whether it's the group or the individual program, and then start to see things that they hadn't seen before and that needed to be improved, and then maybe configure themselves differently to take that on. I know I saw that a few times.
Mhm.
Did you see that?
Oh, absolutely, Kevin. And I would say that um, businesses always have difficult problems to solve. But more and more, I do think the problems are more complex. They require more cross-functional collaboration. It's not enough just to be a strong functional manager. It's what you're talking about in terms of lead across the organization. So there is no question that as we're moving forward as an enterprise, and people are going to these broad meetings, these transformational meetings, or these cross-functional meetings, and they're showing up, understanding and thinking about, I'm here as an enterprise leader. I'm not here just to represent my functional point of view. And so having this program in place, making it clear that the expectation was people are showing up as enterprise leaders, and what does that mean? It really helped create uh, a sense of what is the expectation of them at that meeting, and you get some successes and you build some momentum, and pretty soon it's just the way you do business.
Yes, it's quite amazing to see when people move their mindset from functional or geographic or business leader to an enterprise leader. I mean, it sounds like just words, but it's not just words.
Mhm.
It's the team, our primary team becomes the enterprise team. And I hate to use the word secondary, but the next level team is our functional or geographic team. And to make that mindset shift is huge. What
Sure.
would your advice be to leaders or companies thinking about engaging Corn Ferry, engaging enterprise leadership? What would your counsel be to those organizations?
Well, my counsel would be it's a big investment, and I would do both the senior team and I would cascade it further in the organization.
Yeah.
There's a phrase I've heard in the past about the concrete middle. You can have great ideas at the top. If you don't bring and engage the rest of the organization, it's just going to be a frustrating experience. So there's a little bit of go big or don't bother. And I think it's having a more comprehensive approach, a deeper approach, will really pay dividends.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ron, for not just the CEO PauseCast, but thanks for our relationship and privilege to work together. And I would love to invite you back very soon, very, very soon, to maybe turn the tables in the CEO PauseCast, and you can ask the quote consultant anything that you would like, because I've been leading this for you to share your experience. So maybe we'll flip the tables in our next conversation.
Well, I think that could be interesting. And Kevin, I appreciate our relationship as well, and really the partnership with you and the whole Corn Ferry team. It's been really great.
Yeah, very good. Thanks again.
My pleasure.
Yeah, bye.